What's up, everyone? Welcome back to History on Repeat. I was getting ready to edit my video on the father of the U.S. Special Forces or an upcoming Badass Battles video when I found an older script that's just kind of been sitting on the wayside. And it reminded me of why I started this channel in the first place. So with that said, quick question. When someone says founding fathers, who pops into your head? Washington, Jefferson, Hamilton? Their stories are told and retold, etched into monuments and currency. But there is one founding father whose influence quietly shaped nearly every pillar of the United States, its independence, its diplomacy, its legal system, and even its moral direction. A man who negotiated with kings, argued for unity when the nation was fragile, and helped define what justice would mean in America. His name was John Jay. And today, we're telling the story of the forgotten founding father we should be talking about. Before we get into today's episode, I want to talk to you about my new partner, Deemed Fit. If there's one thing history makes painfully clear, it's that strength isn't just physical. A lot of the people we talk about on this channel, soldiers, surgeons, elite military groups, and everyday heroes, carried invisible weight long before anyone ever talked about mental health. They pushed through stress, trauma, and burnout because they had to, often without support. And as a veteran who struggles with my own mental health and have had friends who have unfortunately lost their fight to theirs, Deemed Fit really stood out to me. Yes, they focus on fitness, but more importantly, they focus on mental resilience, accountability, and building habits that actually help people deal with stress instead of just masking it. Their approach isn't about chasing perfection. It's about showing up, staying consistent, and taking care of your head as much as your body. And Deemed Fit doesn't just talk the talk. They actively give a portion of every sale to EMTs, first responders, and those on the front lines, people who deal with chaos, pressure, and trauma as a part of their daily routine. The kind of people who are always there when things go sideways, but they don't always get the support they deserve. By partnering with Deemed Fit, you're not just supporting the channel, you're also supporting a company that believes fitness can be a tool for mental health, recovery, and purpose, not just aesthetics. So if you're looking for a program that cares about your mindset and not just your max lift, or if you want to support a brand that gives back to those who give everything, check out Deemed Fit. And by using my promo code HISTORYONREPEAT, you get 15% off your first order. The link's in the description below. All right, let's get back to the reason why you're all here.
It's History on Repeat.
Hell yeah.
Before John Jay was negotiating with kings and shaping the Supreme Court, he was a quiet kid growing up in a world that taught him discipline early and the cost of instability. John Jay was born in 1745 in New York City, but his childhood wasn't spent in the middle of colonial luxury. His family had money, yes, but it came with pressure. The Jays were merchants with deep ties to the British world, and expectations were clear. Education, order, and responsibility came first. Then tragedy hit. Several of Jay's siblings died young, and the family left the city for a rural estate in Rye, New York. That move wasn't just about health. It changed John Jay permanently. Life in Rye was quiet, isolated, and structured. There were no crowds, no chaos, just books, routine, and long stretches of reflection. Jay grew up serious, methodical, and deeply uncomfortable with disorder, something that would later shape every political decision he made. From an early age, Jay learned that stability wasn't guaranteed. It had to be built. At 14 years old, Jay enrolled at King's College, what we now call Columbia University. And he didn't just coast through. He studied classical philosophy, law, history, mathematics, and theology. But what really set him apart was how he connected these subjects. For Jay, law wasn't just about rules on paper. It was the tool that kept society from falling apart. While other students leaned into rhetoric and politics, Jay focused on structure, how governments worked, how authority could be abused, and how order could be preserved without tyranny. After graduating, Jay apprenticed under one of New York's top lawyers and quickly built a reputation as calm, precise, and unshakable. He didn't grandstand, he didn't provoke, he listened, he analyzed, and when he spoke, people paid attention. This mindset carried into his personal life too. Jay married Sarah Livingston, from one of New York's most powerful families, tying him into a network of political and intellectual elites, but also reinforcing his belief in responsibility, restraint, and public duty. By the time tensions with Britain started heating up, John Jay wasn't looking for a revolution. He was looking for order, which is why, early on, he pushed for reconciliation rather than rebellion. He believed Britain had crossed lines, but he feared chaos even more than oppression. It wasn't until it became clear that compromise was impossible that Jay accepted independence as the only option left. And once he did, he never looked back. John Jay didn't become a revolutionary because he loved conflict. He became one because he believed the system had failed and that someone had to rebuild it properly. That belief would follow him for the rest of his life. As war broke out, John Jay became one of the most important yet least visible leaders of the American cause. He helped write New York's first Constitution. He served as president of the Continental Congress, a role similar to today's Speaker of the House during one of the darkest periods of the war. But Jay's true battlefield was diplomacy. By 1779, the American Revolution wasn't looking heroic anymore. It was expensive, it was messy, and most importantly, America was running out of money. Congress couldn't tax. The currency was collapsing. The army needed food, weapons, and pay. France was helping out, but not nearly enough to keep the war going long term. So Congress made a decision. They sent John Jay to Spain. On paper, the mission was simple: get financial support, secure recognition of the United States, and bring back help before everything fell apart. In reality, it was one of the most frustrating diplomatic assignments of the entire war. When Jay arrived in Madrid, he expected formal negotiations. Instead, he got silence. Spanish officials refused to recognize him as a legitimate ambassador. Meetings were delayed, promises were vague, weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. Spain didn't trust the American Revolution, and they had a good cause to be nervous. Spain was a monarchy with massive colonial holdings across Central and South America. If American colonists could overthrow a king, what stopped Spanish colonies from getting the same idea? From Spain's perspective, America wasn't a partner, it was a potential problem. Spain wanted Britain weakened, but it didn't want a strong, independent republic popping up next door. That tension defined everything Jay dealt with. And then there was the Mississippi River. Spain controlled Louisiana and the land surrounding the Mississippi, and they were terrified of American expansion west. Spanish officials demanded that the United States give up navigation rights on the river in exchange for aid. John Jay refused. Giving up the Mississippi would have crippled the future of the country. It would have boxed America in along the Atlantic and killed any real chance of growth. Jay understood that, and independence meant nothing if a nation couldn't expand or trade freely. So he held the line, and it nearly broke him. Jay's situation in Spain deteriorated fast. He was constantly short on funds. He had to borrow money just to survive. His staff struggled. His health suffered, and still, Spain stalled. No treaty, no recognition, no guarantees. But Jay didn't cave. Eventually, Spain quietly provided him limited financial assistance through back channels. It wasn't the full support Jay wanted, but it helped keep the American war effort alive. Spain also fought Britain elsewhere, forcing them to divide their attention and resources. On the surface, Jay's mission to Spain looked like a failure, but in reality, it taught him something critical. European powers didn't have friends, only interests. No ally would ever protect America's future better than Americans themselves. That lesson followed John Jay to Paris. And when the time came to negotiate peace with Britain, Jay remembered Spain. He remembered the stalling, the manipulation, the pressure to sacrifice the future for short-term survival, and he refused to let it happen again. By the time John Jay arrived in Paris in 1782, he wasn't naive anymore. Spain had taught him a hard lesson. European powers didn't have friends. They had interests, and that made him immediately wary of France. On paper, France was America's closest ally. They provided money, ships, troops, and a naval presence that helped turn the tide of the war. Without France, the revolution probably doesn't work. But Jay didn't confuse help with loyalty. France had entered the war for one reason: to weaken Britain. not to create a powerful new republic. And by the time peace talks started, French priorities were very different from America's. France wanted the United States independent, sure, but small, limited, and dependent. They didn't want America pushing west. They didn't want it dominating trade, and they definitely didn't want it becoming a rival power. That tension came to a head during the peace negotiations. Officially, American diplomats were supposed to negotiate with Britain only through France. That was the Congress's instruction. But Jay noticed something was off. French diplomats were delaying talks, filtering information, and quietly backing Spain's demand to block American access to the Mississippi River. To Jay, it felt familiar. Spain all over again. France, like Spain, wanted to manage America, not empower it. And John Jay wasn't having it. So he made a controversial call. Without French approval and technically against Congress's instructions, Jay opened direct negotiations with Britain. This was risky on multiple levels. If it failed, Jay could have been recalled, disgraced, and blamed for wrecking the alliance. If France found out too early, it could have blown up negotiations entirely. But Jay believed something crucial. Britain, not France, was the party that actually needed peace, and Britain was willing to deal. Jay found a receptive audience among British negotiators who wanted to end the war and stabilize trade. Unlike France and Spain, Britain had no reason to limit American expansion. In fact, they saw benefits in future commercial ties. When John Adams arrived in Paris, he immediately sided with Jay. Benjamin Franklin, more trusting of France at first, eventually recognized that Jay was right. Together, they pushed forward, quietly and deliberately, cutting France out of the critical stages of negotiation. The result was the Treaty of Paris in 1783, and the terms were shockingly favorable to the United States. America wasn't just recognized as independent, it gained territory all the way to the Mississippi River. It secured fishing rights off Newfoundland. It emerged as a fully sovereign nation, not a client state of France. When France finally saw the final terms, they were furious, but it was too late. The treaty was signed, the war was over, and America had secured its future. John Jay's role in this moment can't be overstated. He didn't reject France as an ally. He rejected the idea that allies should control America's destiny. Jay understood that independence didn't end with winning a war. It ended when the country controlled its own future. And in Paris, John Jay made sure it did. When the war finally ended, the revolutionary leaders were exhausted. John Jay was no exception. But instead of stepping back, he stepped into one of the hardest phases of the American experiment. Winning independence was one thing. Figuring out how to make it last was another. Right after the war, Jay served as Secretary of Foreign Affairs under the Articles of Confederation. It was basically the closest thing the U.S. had to a Secretary of State. And the job was brutal. The national government was weak. Congress had no real power to tax, enforce treaties, or compel states to cooperate. Foreign nations ignored American diplomats, violated treaties, and treated the U.S. like a temporary project. Jay saw the problem clearly. America didn't need more passion, it needed structure. That belief pushed him straight into the fight over the Constitution. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. John Jay wasn't a major player inside the Constitutional Convention itself. Illness kept him away for much of 1787, but that doesn't mean he wasn't shaping the Constitution. Jay had already been laying the intellectual groundwork for years, in letters, reports, and policy recommendations. He had been arguing that the United States needed a stronger central government, one that could speak with a single voice abroad and enforce laws at home. Many of the convention's delegates already knew Jay's position. He wasn't drafting clauses. He was influencing the mindset. When the Constitution was proposed in 1787, it wasn't guaranteed to survive. A lot of Americans were afraid it gave the federal government too much power. John Jay was firmly on the other side. He believed a weak union was a death sentence. Along Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, Jay helped write the Federalist Papers, explaining why unity, federal authority, and a strong national government weren't threats. They were safeguards. Together, they wrote 85 essays breaking down the Constitution piece by piece, not in legal jargon, but in plain language regular people could follow. This wasn't propaganda, it was damage control for a fragile republic. John Jay wasn't the loudest writer in the group. Hamilton was aggressive, Madison was theoretical, Jay was experienced. By the time the Federalist Papers were written, Jay had already negotiated with Britain, dealt with Spain's stalling tactics, watched France quietly push its own agenda, and seen firsthand how weak the US looked on the world stage. So when Jay wrote about foreign threats and national security, he wasn't guessing, he was warning. The Federalist number 2, Jay laid out one of the most important points. He argued that Americans were already more united than they realized, and breaking that unity would only invite disaster. He pointed out that the geography alone made unity logical. The states were connected by rivers, trade routes, and shared borders. Fragmenting into separate nations would lead to disputes, tariffs, border conflicts, and eventually war. Jay wasn't romantic about unity. He was practical. Separate states wouldn't stay peaceful forever. They would fight. All this mattered, especially in New York. New York was deeply divided on the Constitution. Without its approval, the new union could have collapsed before it even started. Jay's reputation carried weight there. He wasn't seen as radical or power-hungry. He was cautious, law-focused, and trusted. When Jay warned that weak national government meant foreign influence and instability, people listened. New York ratified the Constitution by a narrow margin. Without that win, everything changes. Jay planned to write more essays, but fate had other plans. He got seriously ill, likely from stress and exhaustion, and was forced to stop after his 5th paper. Hamilton and Madison carried the rest. Still, Jay's early essays helped set the tone. They framed the Constitution not as a power grab, but as protection. Protection from foreign manipulation, protection from internal collapse, and protection from repeating Europe's mistakes. When George Washington made John Jay the first Chief Justice of the United States in 1789, the job description was vague. There was no Supreme Court building, no established authority, no public trust. Most Americans barely knew the court existed, and honestly, many didn't care. That meant Jay wasn't just leading a court, he was building one from scratch. At the time, the Supreme Court was the weakest branch of government. Congress made the laws, the president enforced them. The court, it mostly rode circuit, literally traveling around the country to hear cases in local courts. Jay spent more time on horseback than on a bench, but he understood something crucial. If the court rushed to grab power, it would lose legitimacy before it ever gained authority. So Jay played the long game. Under Jay, the court focused on narrow, careful decisions. No grandstanding, no political speeches, no power plays. Jay emphasized restraint, consistency, and respect for state courts, while still enforcing federal authority when it mattered. He believed the court's job wasn't to dominate politics, it was to stabilize them. That approach earned quiet trust. Jay's most famous case came in 1793, Chisholm v. Georgia. The question was simple but explosive. Could a private citizen sue a state in federal court? Georgia said no, sovereign immunity. Jay disagreed. Writing the opinion, Jay argued that the sovereignty didn't belong to the states, it belonged to the people. That was a radical idea at the time. The ruling sent shockwaves through the country. States freaked out, and Congress responded by passing the 11th Amendment, limiting the court's ruling. And here's the important part. Jay didn't see this as a loss. He saw it as the system working. The court spoke, the people responded, the Constitution adjusted. That was constitutional balance in action. Jay was obsessive about judicial independence. He believed judges had to be insulated from political pressure, public opinion, and short-term emotions. That meant avoiding partisan language, writing clear, restrained opinions, and letting Congress and the states react. Jay wanted the court to be respected, not feared. The philosophy laid the groundwork for future judicial review. In 1794, the United States was on the edge of another war. British troops were still occupying forts in the Northwest Territory, even though they weren't supposed to be there. American ships were being seized, sailors were being impressed into the British Navy, public anger was boiling over. Many Americans wanted war. George Washington didn't, so he turned to the one man he trusted to handle hostile negotiations without blowing everything up: John Jay. Jay was sent to London with a mission that no one was going to like: avoid war, even if it cost political popularity. From the start, Jay was negotiating from a weak position. The US had a small navy, limited leverage, and an economy still tied closely to British trade. Britain knew it. Jay couldn't threaten force, so he had to focus on damage control. The resulting agreement, known as the Jay Treaty, did several critical things. Britain agreed to evacuate its frontier forts. It opened limited trade between US and Britain territories. It set up commissions to resolve lingering disputes from the Revolution. And what it didn't do, it didn't stop impressment. It didn't include compensation for enslaved people taken by the British. And Americans were furious. Jay became one of the most hated men in the country. Protesters burned him in effigy, newspapers attacked him nonstop. Even Thomas Jefferson despised the treaty. Jay's response? Silence. He believed something most politicians didn't. Bad peace was better than good war. Washington agreed. He ratified the treaty, and in the long run, Jay was proven right. The treaty prevented another war with Britain, stabilized American trade, and gave the young nation time to grow stronger. Without it, the US likely gets dragged back into a conflict before it's ready. Jay knew the cost. He paid it. And unfortunately for Jay, his work wasn't finished. While Jay was in Britain, he was elected governor of New York. The revolution had hit New York harder than almost anywhere else. Cities were damaged, loyalists had fled or been driven out, trade networks were broken, and politics was deeply divided between Federalists and Democratic Republicans. Jay walked into a job where nobody agreed on much of anything, and that didn't bother him. Jay believed governing wasn't about exciting people, it was about stabilizing systems. One of Jay's first challenges as governor was restoring order in a state that had been occupied by British forces for years. Property disputes were everywhere. Loyalist estates had been seized, former enemies were suddenly neighbors again, and Jay resisted calls for mass retaliation against loyalists. Instead, he pushed for legal resolution through courts rather than revenge through politics. To Jay, the rule of law mattered more than settling scores. That approach wasn't popular, but it helped him prevent long-term instability and cycles of punishment that could have fractured the state. This is where Jay's moral compass really shows. By the time he became governor, Jay had come to see slavery as incompatible with the ideals of the Republic. He had already helped found the New York Manumission Society, which worked to free enslaved people and protect free Black Americans from kidnapping and illegal sale. As governor, Jay had real power to act. In 1799, he signed for the Act of Gradual Abolition of Slavery. The law didn't end slavery overnight, but it set the state on a clear path to abolition. Children born to enslaved parents after the law's passage would be free after serving a period of indenture. Slavery in New York would eventually end completely in 1827. Jay understood that immediate abolition wasn't politically possible, but moral progress was. He chose movement over perfection. Jay's stance on slavery wasn't symbolic. Earlier in his career, when the New York legislature passed a weaker emancipation bill, Jay vetoed it. Not because it went too far, but because it didn't go far enough. That veto likely cost him re-election. Jay accepted that. To him, principle mattered more than position. Politically, Jay governed as a Federalist, but he avoided partisan warfare whenever possible. He stayed focused on strengthening state intuitions, supporting infrastructure and commerce, and encouraging public morality and education. Jay believed government worked best when it was boring, predictable, fair, and restrained. That belief clashed with the increasingly heated party politics of the 1700s, and Jay wanted no part of that future. After 2 terms as governor, Jay had options. Washington wanted him back on the Supreme Court. Federalists wanted him to stay politically active. Jay declined. He believed his work was done. Rather than cling to power, he retired to his farm in Bedford, New York, choosing family, faith, and reflection over office and influence. As governor, John Jay didn't chase headlines. He healed a state still recovering from war He strengthened the rule of law, he pushed New York toward abolition, and he did it knowing the political cost. John Jay governed the way he lived, with restraint, conviction, and a long-term view. In a time of revolution and noise, he chose stability, and that may be his most underrated legacy of all. John Jay died in 1829 at the age of 83. No monuments tower over his name, yet America bears his fingerprints everywhere. Without John Jay, America might not have secured independence on favorable terms. The Supreme Court might not stand as a co-equal branch. The Constitution might not have survived ratification. He was not the loudest founder, but he may have been one of the most essential. History doesn't always reward the builders who work in silence, and that's why I repeat it here. Thank you for watching History on Repeat. Make sure to like and subscribe for more untold stories of incredible individuals throughout history, and comment below another individual you'd like me to cover, or as always, if I might have missed anything. Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp. I'll see you in the next one.
It's History on Repeat.
Hell yeah.